March 8, 2014. A seemingly ordinary day, just like any other. Kuala Lumpur International Airport bustled with activity, filled with the usual hustle and bustle of travelers. Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 prepared for departure. Its destination, Beijing, China. 239 souls were on board, each with their own stories and dreams. They were ready to embark on their journeys, unaware of the fate that awaited them. Little did they know, their flight would become an infamous chapter in aviation history, a story that would be told for years to come, a mystery that continues to haunt us to this day, shrouded in darkness and uncertainty. The Boeing 777-200ER, a modern marvel of engineering, taxied onto the runway, ready for takeoff. The engines roared to life, a powerful sound of technology and human ingenuity. The plane gracefully lifted into the night sky, embarking on its journey. It began its scheduled journey towards Beijing, a routine flight path. Everything seemed normal, routine, expected as the flight progressed. No one could have predicted the harrowing events that were about to unfold, events that would change everything. The flight proceeded as planned for the first 38 minutes, without any signs of trouble. Air traffic controllers maintained routine contact with the pilots, ensuring everything was on track. Passengers settled into their seats, finding ways to pass the time. Some slept, some read, some chatted, all unaware of the impending disaster. They were unaware that they were flying towards an abyss of uncertainty, a void that would soon engulf them, an enigma that would baffle the world, leaving experts and families searching for answers. MH370 was a routine flight, a familiar route, a seasoned crew, all experienced and capable. But within the next hour, the unthinkable would happen, altering the course of aviation history. The plane would vanish without a trace, leaving behind a void of unanswered questions. Leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions, a mystery that still lingers, a puzzle that continues to perplex investigators and captivate the world, a story that remains unsolved. Those familiar with aviation understand that a modern passenger jet cannot simply vanish without a trace. With advanced equipment on board, ground-based radar systems, and satellites in orbit, an aircraft cannot simply disappear. Even in the event of a crash, these technological devices should provide clues about its location and the time of the incident. However, 10 years after Flight 370 disappeared, the mystery remains unsolved. In this video, we will try to solve the mystery of the missing Boeing by following the flight history, studying the reports, analyzing possible scenarios, and trying to understand where the truth may lie. The fateful night of March 8, 2014 was calm and clear. The Boeing 777 was preparing to fly from Kuala Lumpur, the capital of Malaysia, to Beijing, China. The flight was expected to last about 5 hours, with favorable weather conditions throughout the journey. Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah, 53, had more than 30 years of flying experience with Malaysian Airlines, including flying Boeing 777s. He was a highly skilled pilot with an excellent reputation. The co-pilot, 27-year-old Fariq Abdul Hamid, had 4 years of experience and had already proven himself to be a competent professional. Before takeoff, the plane was fully fueled, enough for a 7.5-hour flight, 2 hours longer than required. This fact would later play a decisive role in the investigation. Timing was also of the essence. At 12:40 a.m., Captain Zachary was cleared for takeoff. By 1:01 a.m., the Boeing had reached its cruising altitude of 35,000 feet, and the captain sounded natural and confident in his communications with ground control. The flight was proceeding smoothly, with no apparent problems, but strange things were about to happen. At 1:08 a.m., Captain Zahari reported to ground control that the plane was at 35,000 feet. This announcement raised eyebrows, as he had just reported the same altitude 7 minutes earlier. The possible reasons for this second message will be investigated later. 11 minutes later, Flight 370 flew over the South China Sea, leaving Malaysian airspace and entering Thai airspace. The Kuala Lumpur controller relayed the message to his counterpart in Ho Chi Minh City, and Captain Zahari responded with a farewell message. The message was intriguing for 2 reasons. First, the controller mentioned a radio frequency that the captain had been instructed to repeat, but he did not. Second, it was the last message from the captain. The plane failed to establish contact with Vietnam and soon disappeared from radar screens, beginning one of the greatest mysteries in aviation history. When an airplane goes missing, the first thought that comes to mind is that it may have crashed. However, as it later turned out, Flight 370 remained in the air for several hours after it disappeared. Moreover, the moment when the plane stopped being tracked by radar was quite significant. It was outside Malaysian airspace, but had not yet entered Vietnamese airspace. It was the perfect time if someone really wanted to make an airplane invisible. What happened to the plane after it disappeared from radar has been the subject of investigation and the source of many theories and speculations. We will rely on facts collected over the past 10 years, which are essential. First, it is important to understand the meaning of the phrase disappeared from radar. There are some technical details that are needed to fully understand the situation. When flying, a passenger plane must stay within the range of a radar, which is usually divided into two types. The first type consists of large, vertically positioned antennas that send signals to the plane and receive reflections back. This older technology is not particularly accurate in determining the location and speed of an aircraft and has a limited range. Modern air traffic tracking systems rely primarily on a second type of radar, which receives data from transponders installed on board the aircraft. This data includes information about location, altitude, speed, and other parameters. Websites like Flightradar use this technology to allow users to track passenger flights in real time around the world. The problem is that the aircraft stops appearing on these radars if its transponders are either faulty or turned off. Let's go back to the events of that fateful night of March 8, 2014. What was happening on the ground after Flight 370 disappeared from radar? The controller in Kuala Lumpur initially noticed nothing unusual, likely because he was busy controlling other aircraft. When he finally realized that MH370 was missing, he assumed that the plane had already left his airspace and was in Vietnamese territory. Meanwhile, Vietnamese controllers recorded Flight 370 entering their airspace and then disappearing from radar. Protocol required them to contact their counterparts in Kuala Lumpur within 5 minutes if they failed to establish contact with the flight. However, the Vietnamese controllers did not do so. Instead, they tried to contact the plane for almost 20 minutes before relaying the information to their Malaysian counterparts. Meanwhile, controllers in Kuala Lumpur contacted Malaysia Airlines, who assured them that everything was fine, noting that the plane was on its planned route over Cambodian airspace. As it later turned out, this information was not based on the plane's actual location, but on a pre-existing flight plan that the airline had. By this time, 4 hours had passed since the flight disappeared. It was only when MH370 failed to arrive in Beijing at the scheduled time that the situation became critical and the plane was declared missing. Search efforts began in the South China Sea, where the plane was last spotted, but unfortunately they yielded no results. Days after the flight disappeared, experts began analyzing transponder and radar data. They determined that the plane continued to fly for several hours after it disappeared from the screens. It was also determined that the plane made a turn and headed back to Malaysia before changing course towards the Indian Ocean. Since Flight 370's disappearance, there have been many theories and speculations about its fate. Some believed that the plane was hijacked by terrorists, while others suggested that it may have been shot down by a missile or collided with another aircraft. However, there is no conclusive evidence to support any of these hypotheses. As such, the mystery surrounding Flight 370 continues to be one of the most significant unsolved mysteries in aviation history. We know that the plane continued to fly even after it disappeared from radar, but what ultimately happened to it remains unknown. We cannot determine why the transponders on board stopped working or were turned off, and questions about who was on board and what they were doing at that moment remain unanswered. The problem faced by Malaysian authorities was like looking for a needle in a haystack without any idea where the haystack was. Once it became clear that the Boeing 777 had not crashed into the South China Sea, journalists were the first to report on MH370's strange flight path, followed by official confirmation. Soon, London-based Inmarsat, a company that specializes in commercial satellites, though not primarily in passenger aviation, stepped in to help with the investigation. It turned out that Inmarsat's satellite data, combined with radar information, could reconstruct MH370's full flight path with a high degree of confidence, while ruling out some of the more obvious theories. The Boeing's journey can be divided into two segments. The first segment is known from civilian and military radar data, and the second was pieced together using satellites. The initial portion of the flight, the 40 minutes before the transponders went dark and the hour after, is particularly important. The most obvious theory, which emerged early on, was that some kind of emergency, such as an equipment failure, fire, or other problem, had caused the transponder to go offline. Such incidents have happened before. For example, in 2010, a UPS Boeing 747 cargo plane crashed in Dubai after an onboard fire caused by lithium batteries igniting in the cargo hold. The most important point, however, is that the theory of a fire on board caused by cargo or an electrical short circuit was debunked by the flight path and several other factors. When the transponders were turned off, the plane did not disappear from radar immediately. First, one component of the transponder system failed, and only after 37 seconds did all other components shut down. This indicates that the cause was not a sudden incident such as a fire or explosion, but a deliberate switching off of the transponders, most likely carried out by the pilots. In addition, the abrupt course change, almost 180 degrees from the original route, suggests that the maneuver was deliberate. The autopilot could not have made such a sharp turn. Tests confirmed that an airplane on autopilot could not have performed such a maneuver. Let's assume that there was a fire on board that disabled the transponders, and the pilots decided to return for an emergency landing. However, they did not do this. They continued on their course, and on the first leg of the route, reconstructed using radar data. The plane was still being controlled manually. This is confirmed by minor deviations in the plane's trajectory, ruling out scenarios such as the pilot being incapacitated due to smoke or cabin depressurization. Inmarsat satellite data allowed the reconstruction of the second segment of the flight after MH370 disappeared from ground radar. According to this data, the Boeing continued to fly for another 6 hours at high altitude and speed towards Antarctica, eventually disappearing in the southern Indian Ocean, where depths reach 5 to 6 kilometers. This poses numerous problems for search operations in the area, making them extremely difficult and expensive. In addition, searching for wreckage in this region would be akin to looking for a needle in a haystack. It is important to note that all this information was not immediately available, which led to search efforts being launched in the wrong places, resulting in nothing being found. Valuable time was also lost in the process. If the Malaysian authorities had immediately disclosed the information about the unusual flight path of the plane, it may have been found along with the passengers. Many people, including close relatives of the passengers, believe that the Malaysian authorities are hiding the true causes of the incident, suggesting that the plane may never have crashed or was shot down. We will discuss these theories later. The search operation lasted several years and became known as one of the largest and most expensive in history. For 2 months, airlines and ships from around the world combed hundreds of square kilometers, starting in the South China Sea, then moving into the Andaman Sea, where the plane was last detected on radar, and eventually heading towards the southern Indian Ocean, where Inmarsat data suggests the plane disappeared. The focus was on underwater exploration. Australian specialists, equipped with more advanced technology to locate the flight recorders, joined the operation. Australian specialists, equipped with more advanced technology to locate the flight recorders, joined the operation. Years were spent surveying vast areas of the seabed. More than $100 million was spent, but no results were achieved. Subsequently, the American company Ocean Infinity continued the search. Under contract with the Malaysian authorities, they were only rewarded for successful discoveries. However, after months of work at the suspected crash site in the southern Indian Ocean, they also found nothing. In July 2015, 16 months after the disappearance, beachgoers on the island of Reunion stumbled upon an unusual object. It was later confirmed to be part of a Boeing 777 wing known as a flaperon. The serial number indicated that it was part of the missing MH370. Eventually, about 20 pieces of Boeing 707 debris were found along the coast of Madagascar and its surrounding areas. Only a few of these were conclusively identified as belonging to MH370, while the rest were considered by experts to be likely remains of the lost aircraft. However, these pieces of debris did not help to clarify what happened. Satellite data almost certainly indicated that the plane crashed in the southern Indian Ocean, and ongoing analysis confirmed that the debris was likely blown to the southeastern shores of Africa. There were no signs of an explosion or fire on the wreckage, bolstering theories about possible deliberate interference in the incident. In 2018, Malaysian authorities published a detailed 450-page investigation report into the incident. First of all, it detailed the technical characteristics of the Boeing 777, the course of the search operations, and the radar data. In conclusion, the authors noted that it was impossible to determine the true causes of the plane's disappearance. However, even this essentially inconclusive report acknowledged that the switching off of transponders and other onboard systems was likely the result of human intervention. Notably, the switching off of these systems and the subsequent change in the plane's course occurred at a point that was ideal for it to disappear from radar. But who carried out this action, and why? Over the years, many theories have emerged during the investigation. Some of these were based on facts and calculations, often proposed by former or current pilots and aviation experts. They analyzed radar data based on their personal experiences, and many of their arguments are familiar or will be familiar to you as you watch. Along with this, various speculative theories have emerged, some of which have formed the basis of major documentaries about MH370, such as those available on Netflix. One theory posits that MH370 was shot down by the US military from Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean, presumably either in response to a perceived threat from an aircraft, or because the military mistakenly shot down a passenger plane that was not responding to signals. There are suggestions that the radar data and debris were then fabricated to cover up what happened. There is an alternative scenario that suggests that after turning over Indonesia, the plane did not head south, but instead flew north and made an emergency landing somewhere in Kazakhstan. The main problem with these theories is that they contradict the data of professionals from different countries who have performed mathematical analysis of the MH370 route using satellite and radar data. However, even the most experienced pilots cannot say with certainty what exactly happened to Flight 370, and there are several versions. Based on the analysis of the flight path, satellite data, and radar information, it can be concluded that the disappearance of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 was an intentional act. Equipment failure or human error are not sufficient explanations for what happened. Possible causes, such as systems failures, bird strikes, lightning, meteors, volcanic clouds, mechanical and electronic failures, fire, smoke, explosion, depressurization, bombs or missiles, cannot explain the route taken by Flight 370. At the time the transponders were switched off, one of the pilots was probably flying the plane. They probably couldn't have been in cahoots during the flight, since it was their first experience working together. This means that the co-pilot, who was not actively flying the plane, either could not access the cockpit because it was locked, or had already lost consciousness. One theory suggests that the captain took the plane to 40,000 feet after making a sharp turn and then depressurized it. The passenger oxygen masks are only designed to last 10 to 15 minutes, which would quickly result in unconsciousness. In contrast, masks in the cockpit can provide oxygen for several hours. When the plane abruptly changed course, not only did the transponder shut down, but a number of other electrical systems failed as well. The purpose of this shutdown remains unclear, but it is likely that it was intended to disable the satellite communication systems, rendering the plane invisible to ground controllers. If this was the case, then for the remaining 6 hours of the flight, only one person survived, the one at the controls. Additional support for this theory is the fact that almost an hour later, at 2:25, some of the plane's electrical systems were reactivated, including those responsible for satellite communications. This allowed the plane's full flight path to be restored. In addition, the cabin was repressurized. However, by that time, it no longer mattered to everyone else on board, since they were all dead. The question remains, was the plane in control, one of the pilots, or was it hijacked? While hijackings are not an everyday occurrence, they unfortunately do happen, and there are many recorded cases throughout aviation history. Over time, security measures have been tightened considerably, making it virtually impossible for an unauthorized person to enter the cockpit. The Boeing model in question was equipped with several layers of security and video surveillance, allowing pilots to see who was at the door. The Boeing model in question was equipped with several layers of security and video surveillance, allowing the pilots to see who was at the door. It is noteworthy that the first disappearance of the plane from radar occurred only a few minutes after Captain Zahari politely said goodbye to the air traffic controller. It is unlikely that a passenger could have taken control in such a short period of time, especially since the disappearance and sharp turn of the plane occurred at an opportune moment between the airspaces of two countries. It seems doubtful that the attackers would have been able to choose such an opportune moment to act. However, let us assume that they had managed to penetrate the cockpit. It would have taken only a few minutes for the captain or co-pilot to contact ground control or activate the appropriate signal. However, they did not do so. One theory regarding the hijacking of MH370 suggests that the transponders and other systems were disabled by accessing the area under the cabin floor, where numerous systems and sensors are located. However, it is difficult to imagine that such a maneuver would have gone unnoticed by the more than 200 people on board. A significant part of the investigation focused on examining the biographies of all 239 people on board, including the crew. The FBI was also involved in this process. As a result, 2 passengers with stolen passports were identified. They turned out to be Iranian citizens with no ties to terrorist organizations. It is likely that they were trying to reach a relatively safe country to seek political asylum. Adding to the intrigue of the case is the presence of 20 employees of Freescale Semiconductor, a company known for its advanced technologies. These specialists were involved in microchips used in various high-tech devices, which makes their presence on the flight especially noteworthy. And ultimately, what was the purpose of the hijacking? Terrorism, financial gain, or political motives? Everything that happened during the 7 hours of flight MH370 suggests that none of these circumstances could have served as the root cause. Moreover, no one has claimed responsibility for the incident, and anonymity is not a typical trait of terrorists. As a result, there are not many theories left, and perhaps the only viable explanation is that the incident was orchestrated by one of the pilots. But who exactly and why? It is also worth mentioning the conspiracy theory that the plane was controlled manually from the ground throughout the flight. According to this theory, either Boeing was testing a new technology or someone managed to hack the plane's control system. However, this theory does not have support among pilots and industry experts. Firstly, it is theoretically difficult to imagine such scenarios. And secondly, analysis of the flight data shows that control was exercised directly from the cockpit. This brings us to the discussion of the people at the controls. Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah, and First Officer Fariq Abdul Hamid. Pilots are not machines. They are people who may face psychological problems, difficult life circumstances, and financial problems. All of these could potentially serve as a motive for one of the pilots to hijack the plane or commit suicide in the line of duty. Real examples from the history of civil aviation support this idea. For example, in 2014, an Ethiopian Airlines co-pilot hijacked a plane with more than 200 passengers on board, flying from Addis Ababa to Milan. When the captain went to the toilet, the co-pilot locked the cockpit door, took over the controls, and landed in Switzerland, asking for political asylum. Luckily, none of the passengers were hurt. In 1999, Egypt Air Flight 990, flying from New York to Cairo, crashed into the ocean just 30 minutes after takeoff. American investigators concluded that it was a deliberate action by the co-pilot, who turned off the engines and steered the plane downwards, killing more than 200 people. In 2015, a Germanwings flight from Barcelona to Dusseldorf suddenly descended and crashed in the Alps. An investigation found that it was a deliberate act by the pilot, who locked the cockpit door after the captain went to the toilet and sent the plane plummeting, taking nearly 150 lives. The co-pilot's actions were driven by serious mental health issues that he hid from the airline. And these are not isolated cases, they are just a few examples. As a result, the pilots were subjected to a thorough background check during the investigation of Flight 370, which included an analysis of their backgrounds, medical records, financial status, and assets. The co-pilot was 27-year-old Fariq Abdul Hamid. There was nothing in his life to suggest that he was a man who would commit a deliberate act of destruction. His financial situation and health were stable, and friends described him as an optimistic young man. In addition, he seemed to be on the verge of marriage. Professionally, Fariq also seemed to be on a promising path. As mentioned earlier, he had recently been given the job of pilot on a Boeing 777. It's a big plane, and getting that job at a young age was prestigious. He had a brilliant career ahead of him. The only suspicious incident involved his phone. According to a report by Malaysian investigators, After the plane veered sharply off its planned route, the co-pilot's iPhone suddenly activated. This happened over Penang Island, and the connection to the phone was established very briefly, with no record of any outgoing or incoming calls. The cell tower simply registered the presence of the device. What could this mean? Since pilots are required to turn off their phones during flight, someone turned on the co-pilot's phone while he was in the air. It is possible that Farik himself activated the phone to make a call and share some information, but this is purely speculative. The real reason for the brief contact with the ground remains unknown. Interestingly, information about Farik's iPhone appeared in the press, thanks to a leak of data from the Malaysian investigation. Many of these findings were not published and did not appear in the final 400-page report. Why? This raises an intriguing question with no definitive answer. The Malaysian government is certainly notorious for its corruption and lack of transparency, but the rationale for covering up such facts is unclear. Despite this, we have no evidence, even circumstantial, that the co-pilot intended to commit such an act. This brings us to the identity of the captain of the plane, Zahari Ahmad Shah. It is important to note that he was 53 years old and had a lot of experience, more than 30 years of flying various Malaysian Airlines aircraft. Since 1998, Zahari had served as a captain on the Boeing 777. He had an impeccable professional reputation, was married and had 3 children. Investigators found that his financial situation and health were stable. Co-workers spoke highly of Zachary, noting his resistance to stress, and he did not exhibit any suspicious behavior before the flight. Investigators carefully analyzed video footage from the airport before takeoff, and his posture, facial expression, and other indicators did not indicate any abnormalities. In his spare time, he was interested in electronics and loved to fly flight simulators, even having his own YouTube channel. Overall, the captain also seemed to have no motive for committing such a terrible act. However, numerous details of the flight analysis pointed to the captain as the prime suspect. The Malaysian authorities' report on the pilot has left many worried. Articles began appearing in the media claiming that the captain was having problems in his personal life. It was reported that he was separated from his wife and had extramarital affairs. However, these rumors were not confirmed by his relatives. Another unusual detail was the flight simulator found in the pilot's home. The suspicious aspect was not the presence of the device itself, but rather the flights that Zahari simulated. Among the numerous saved and deleted data, investigators noted a route that ended in the southern Indian Ocean, reflecting the actual trajectory of MH370, reconstructed from radar and satellite data. This may indicate that the captain may have rehearsed this tragic flight in a simulator. Many experts in the aviation industry pointed out that everything about Boeing seemed well prepared. Even stranger was the fact that information about Zahari's flight in a simulator was leaked to the press from a confidential report by Malaysian authorities. They later confirmed that such a route did exist, but it was initially deleted by Zahari himself and restored by investigators. In the official report, Malaysian authorities concluded that this was not an attempt to rehearse the final flight of MH370, and some independent researchers agree with this hypothesis, considering it a coincidence. However, if it is not a coincidence, the question arises, was Zahari really rehearsing the route of Flight 370? Other independent experts have found that this particular flight did not have a designated landing point on the simulator, unlike hundreds of other flights that did. It is obvious that Zahari has become the prime suspect in this incident for some time. However, we do not have enough convincing evidence of his guilt. There are only indirect conclusions. One thing is clear: the person who committed this act was well prepared and knew exactly what to do. Despite the data of several researchers indicating the approximate area of the plane's crash in the Indian Ocean, there is no exact information about the last stage of the flight. It is not known whether the plane was gradually descending due to running out of fuel or whether it was a sudden maneuver that led to the crash. This distinction is crucial to understanding the motives behind the incident. It is clear that the person at the controls performed precise and organized actions during the flight. He turned the plane at specific points, turned off electronics, and evaded radar detection. Did he just sit there and wait for the plane to run out of fuel? However, according to some analyses, the plane was descending smoothly rather than sharply, while other data suggests otherwise. We can only hope that there is still a chance to uncover the definitive truth about the incident, especially with the discovery of more MH370 debris. Unfortunately, due to the vastness of the ocean that needs to be explored and the hundreds of millions of dollars needed to continue the search, the likelihood of renewed efforts remains extremely low. As a result, the case of Flight 370 will likely remain one of the greatest mysteries in aviation history. As we delve deeper into the enigma of Flight MH370, the ocean itself seems to whisper secrets long buried beneath its waves. The search for answers has led us to the brink of human perseverance, where technology and determination meet the boundless expanse of the sea. The remnants of the plane, scattered like breadcrumbs across the ocean floor, tell a story of tragedy and unfulfilled destinies. Yet, amidst the sorrow, there remains a glimmer of hope, a hope that one day the truth will rise from the depths. Each piece of debris, each fragment of evidence, brings us closer to understanding what transpired on that fateful day. The families of the passengers and crew continue to seek closure, their lives forever intertwined with the mystery of MH370. Thank you for watching our video. We invite you to subscribe to our channel and share your thoughts, impressions, and versions of what happened to Flight MH370 in the comments below. Together, we can keep the memory of those lost alive and perhaps one day, bring light to the darkness that surrounds this maritime mystery.